Thanks everybody for being here. Before we begin, I want to go ahead and acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the Duwamish, Suquamish, and Muckleshoot tribes, and that we occupy this land. This acknowledgement does not take the place of authentic relationships with Indigenous communities, but serves as a first step in honoring the land we occupy and resisting the erasure of Indigenous past, present, and future. I encourage all of us to turn this acknowledgement into action by supporting Indigenous communities financially if you are able, and through centering Indigenous voices in film, art, and wider cultural conversations you engage. Thank you all so much for being here at SIFF 2021. I am so pleased to be here to do this live Q&A with director Marion Hill of Ma Belle, My Beauty. Please wave, say hello, Marion.
Hey everyone, thanks for coming and watching the film. Thanks Megan for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to take care of a couple housekeeping notes. I want to remind everyone to make sure that they vote, rate the films that you've seen using the stars on each film page. Your vote for the Golden Space Needle Award will be announced on Sunday, April 18, and it is super important to filmmakers if they are able to receive that. I want to go ahead and also remind everybody that if you have questions, that you can submit those at any time using the Q&A portal down at the bottom of the screen. And if you have any comments, respectful notes and chat that you'd like to share, you can drop those in the chat at any time. I just recommend changing it so that it is going to panelists and attendees when you are sharing those messages. And with that, I think that we can begin. Marion, first of all, thank you so much for bringing your film to Seattle, to this film festival. It was such a joy to watch, and I honestly needed that movie so badly. And I rewatched it today just as a little extra treat to me. And I just wanted to start off by asking you, like, where the film began, where the story began, and how it came to exist.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate that. The story began with me, me being a young teenager who loved like romance movies, love stories. I watched Casablanca a lot and all, the old traditional stuff. And that was just what really attracted me to cinema. And, eventually, obviously, as I grew older, grew into my queerness and just, tried to navigate my own love, I found that love stories weren't quite what my love stories didn't quite resemble what I had grown up watching. So for me, it was always, I'm going to make my first film a love story. And then I wanted it to be nuanced. I wanted it to center women and queer women of color, and have us be agents of our own love stories and not necessarily just battling, society or husbands or things like that. So that was kind of the essence I started with. And then I'm based here in New Orleans and have been here a little while, and just kind of wanted to bring the vibrancy of the community here that I love into the story, and took them to France, which was actually a town that I largely grew up in, and so I brought my community over there, and yeah, and it all kind of fused together in this really interesting way.
And because you just touched on, that you grew up in this part of the south of France, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more extensively about shooting in these locations and coming to this place and finding all of these beautiful backdrops that really add so much to the film. Especially, I have to add that, I mean, this is your first feature, it's your directorial debut. Going and shooting not where you live and have a lot of resources in New Orleans, but going and shooting in France. Talk a little bit about bringing your people with you to France or the community that you found there to shoot in these places.
Yeah. Well, yes, having sort of grown up, I grew up kind of moving around a lot, but knowing a lot of my kind of uh, family is in that village, and so village town. So we actually, it was the most kind of guerrilla grassroots experience that a lot of us had before we really, um, we were put up in three neighboring houses, across three neighboring houses, and we kind of just all were, it was this very COVID relevant experience because we were very isolated. We didn't really leave the house much where we were shooting, and everyone was kind of staying in this little bubble that we created. And so it was really that just kind of set the tone for the whole project and the whole production experience, because it was all kind of created within a community of people who were really showing up because they were excited, because they wanted to support me or support my, my comrades making this film. And we had, but it sort of felt like the whole village was kind of rallying behind us and just enjoyed having us around. And for the Americans who were in France, some of whom were out of the U.S. for the first time, it was, I think we were all on this journey in the way that the actors were. I mean, the characters are in the film too, so it was just this very cohesive experience for everyone. And I think, yeah, we all miss it a lot.
And I feel like you kind of fuse the different cultures together, like the New Orleans vibes with the French, the culture of drinking and eating. I just needed a glass of wine so badly when I was watching the movie, because it just makes me thirsty and hungry to be in these places. How did you go about creating or like adding that, like the French food and wine culture? Like, how did that come into play in the script that you were writing? Or how did it add to like the visual and tonal language of the film?
Yeah, it added a lot. I think I had always kind of pictured that these kinds of scenes that we're seeing in the film would take place around a table or over a meal or over drinks. So while that was a given, it was really fun to play with what exactly they were consuming given what was going on in the scene. The olives being one of probably the more memorable ones. It was in the script that Birdie is kind of aggressively pulling the pits out of her mouth and throwing them across the yard, and that's something that I've just seen French people do when they're arguing. and I thought it was so, I love how people's mood is reflected in how they're eating something. And yeah, it kind of, and another thing that we found was that the actors, sometimes, we weren't really feeling a scene. There was something missing, and then all it took was, changing out what they were eating or putting a different drink in their hand, and they would completely transform, their presence.
Well, there's such a sensuality to all of the eating and drinking throughout the film, and really the whole film just oozes with sexuality in a really exciting way. Like what work went into creating the on-screen chemistry?
There was some very important, not extensive, but important pre-work that we did here in New Orleans, specifically between Bertie and Lane. And it all started in the audition room. I mean, we had people coming and read with Idella, who plays Birdie, who was already cast. And then obviously, the first thing we were looking for was chemistry, given this story and this script. And it was kind of amazing, the chemistry. I mean, you hear stories about like actors who had amazing chemistry, and like they were two of them who had that experience. And so Hannah auditioned, and then Hannah left the room, and Idella literally giggled as soon as Hannah left the room. So in my mind, they were cast already after that. And we had it was a lot of one-on-one, me with each of them, just kind of conversations, lunches, phone calls, where I would kind of really get to know them. And then I think by virtue of that, you know, what ultimately was in the script was really rooted in parts of, you know, who they are as well. And not entirely, of course, but yeah, and then we went on what Hannah calls a spooky retreat to Mississippi, the three of us, and kind of just created, you know, we didn't really do much, but we just kind of created some memories together that we then could carry with us into production.
Yeah, and you spoke a little bit about casting Hannah, but I'm wondering if you can talk more about bringing Idella on, as well as you know, Sivan, as well as the character or the man who played Fred, whose name I didn't write down mistakenly.
Lucian, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, it being my first feature, I was very aware that, you know, I couldn't just speak any actor into this, you know, abyss and expect them to show up. But what I ended up getting was even better than that. They were all, funnily enough, you know, connected to me somehow prior to even writing the script. And I could go through each one, but that would not be that interesting. But Idella specifically, I actually just saw in a short film called Blood Runs Down at the New Orleans Film Festival, where we both are, you know, just local community members. And the part she played was nothing like Birdie at all, but I kind of saw Idella afterwards at a party, and just like her energy was screaming at me, and I couldn't, you know, I couldn't ignore it. And so we just got to talking, and then like everything kind of just fell into place after that. And Sivan, I also met at a film festival, but I think 2 or 3 years prior to that, and we've been in touch ever since then. And I kind of just figured out what the story was going to be based on these 3 amazing women, and then I went and found Fred in a more traditional route, slightly.
I mean, the thing that really fascinated me about Fred's character was he's so secure in a way that I haven't seen men be on screen very often.
Yeah.
Like I feel like, you know, in a traditional movie, like it would, like the story would ultimately like recenter around like Fred's freaking out that Birdie is like, that she needs more than just him. You know, I think that like it's just a really fascinating depiction of masculinity and being like comfortable in who you are. I'd love to hear more about developing that character and, you know, what you put into creating him.
Yeah. I mean, I think there was, of course, a certain amount of me that just wanted to seize all opportunities to decenter man from story. That said, it also was a beautiful opportunity to, you know, first step is decenter, but then also how do we develop this strong person, character, so literally supporting character, supporting person, in a way that's genuinely also intriguing and truthful and honest. And yeah, it was fun. I mean, Lucien was really it was really fun to work with, and he jokes that, you know, it was hard for him to get out of the center, which I think there's some truth to that. Not in an ugly way, just, you know, he wasn't used to it. And but I think watching him kind of rise to that and really lean into it and come to love it was really fun, and I think was sort of the point. And yeah.
It's fascinating to me because, you know, he seems to have his own like self-interests that are motivating him in some way. And I think that with both Lane and with Fred, I am fascinated that, like, you know, again, in like a traditional sort of like love triangle, you would think of the two of them as like fighting over her. And instead, it feels, while like, you know, somewhat personally motivated, they're fighting for her to, like, you know, they want her happiness and they want to figure out how to make her feel whole. Like, were there movies that you saw, like, look to, that you're like, these are the ones that I'm trying to like subvert, or like, are there types of narratives that you were looking to that you wanted to like steer away from, like structurally anyways?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely exhausted by, you know, in all of our love stories between two female identifying people, that how, you know, the literal conflict, because in a story we have, okay, your protagonist, what does your protagonist want? And then the movie takes place in which there is conflict standing in the way of your character getting what they want. That's, you know, story 101. And in the case of these love stories, there was always either man or society, like I said earlier, or something to that effect that was, you know, standing in the way of the two women being together, or whatever their goal was. And it's, you know, to me, it's both frustrating and annoying, no longer relevant to the queer experience, in, you know, or no longer necessarily relevant to the queer experience, and is also just, I mean, reductive storytelling, I think. So yeah, that was, and so it was actually really difficult to well, okay, because then I had to figure out, okay, what is the conflict? What is standing in the way of these women being together? And that's where all the nuance comes in. That's where all the authentic kind of, you know, that's why we're so drawn to what these people are thinking, is because it's so rich, because we've opened up a whole vortex of, you know, inner monologues and inner struggles, and you know, what it looks like when we ourselves are standing in the way of our unhappiness, and what does that mean?
I mean, I love that when the film ends, it's not, I mean, it feels so complete, but it also is so open-ended, and that you don't really know where their lives are going to take them. You know, it's so hard because you feel like you see this deep love between them that Birdie is not accepting of at the end. Did you always know that you wanted it to kind of end in this kind of loose space where you don't know, like, maybe they would find each other in the future, like maybe Birdie and Fred's music is going to take off, like, talk
Yeah. Great question. I mean, again, to go back to what I said earlier about traditional love stories, you know, movie starts with people meeting, people fall in love, and then usually, you know, they end up together, they get married, they have babies, whatever, the end. And I think there's a lot of reasons why, you know, many of us want to get away from that linear concept of relationship, right? And this idea that you have a beginning, middle, and end, and you meet your person and then it's over, you're done. Because so yeah, the film for me needed to reflect this idea that relationships are always evolving. Like there's never an end. And even if, you know, even if traditionally we think of marriage as the final stage, and I think that ironically that's what, you know, that's why Lane is so pissed off at the beginning of the movie, because she's like, that's not what, you know, that's not what we do. And yeah, I think there was a version of the script where you know, they ended up a little closer to something, Birdie and Lane ending up together, not really, but it didn't feel like that's what we needed. Yeah.
I want to address something that's in the chat here, because I have kind of a question around that, and I also want to remind folks that they can submit their questions in the Q&A box on the bottom. But someone mentioned that they loved the music in the film. I'd love to hear more about the process of collaborating with Mahmoud Chouki. How did he get involved? How much is composed versus needle drops? Talk us through kind of creating that added atmosphere with the music.
Yeah. So the music sort of came before everything else, in some manner of speaking. Yeah, just like everything else in this film, you know, Mahmoud is my friend. We know each other from the New Orleans music community, and he happens to be a genius. And no one is a genius, for the record, but I'll say he's a genius. And we were just really excited to work together, and I didn't even have a script yet. I knew where we were going to shoot, and I knew it was going to be a love story, and I knew that the characters were going to be musicians, and I also kind of knew what I wanted it to sound like, or at least certain parts of the film, and he was kind of the perfect collab because he's been in New Orleans for a while, and so he's very much a fusion in the way that I am of culture, fusion of cultures. He embodies a fusion of cultures, and that was exactly what I wanted in the music. And so, yeah, we kind of just had writing sessions every few weeks, and this was back in 2018, early 2019. And so by the time we went to shoot the film, we already had, I would say, three of the key kind of moments, basically not recorded but written, and so I knew exactly what they would sound like while we were shooting. And so I also got to kind of give the cinematographer an idea of what things were going to sound like, and so we did all have this kind of cohesive soundtrack as we were filming. And so then after, during post-production, obviously the rest of the work took place, and we recorded everything here in New Orleans. Mahmoud brought in 25 or so local musicians. We were doing it during quarantine, so musicians were painfully available, which was why we kind of could have them. We had some of the best musicians in New Orleans coming in, and yeah, and the way it was written is, you know, very much how New Orleans jazz is written. It's like you have your chart. Mahmoud had the charts, he had his melody, but then the beautiful thing was that musicians come in and they kind of do their thing, and and it depends who it is, it depends what mood they're in, kind of informed that day, informed, you know, how it's going to sound. And it felt like a very exciting extension of the film, of the storytelling process, to be doing it in that way.
And yeah, it just adds so much to the world. So I mean, super, like, mega applause for that.
Thanks. Yeah.
I want to answer or ask this one question from the Q&A that we have here from the audience, from Maddie, who wants to know, how did you get your start in the industry? And the essential question, what would be your advice to young filmmakers who are just starting out?
Yeah. My start, and you're looking at it. This is my start in the industry, Maddie. This is it.
What is
very new for me?
What is your background in, like, what brought you into making film and into your directorial debut?
Yeah. Well, I grew up actually a musician. There was a while where I was, you know, on the classical pianist track, and in high school realized that I thought I wanted to write music for movies, and then realized that actually I just wanted to direct movies. So I did study film as an undergrad, and then I made a short my senior year, and that was really key because my short did pretty well in the queer festival circuit, and then I had this wonderful community of like queer mentors and other filmmakers from that experience, who kind of, you know, were able to walk me through here and there. You know, everyone has their own way of getting their first feature made. Yeah, I made 2 shorts. So I made that short, and then I made, you know, a few more. I was just constantly producing work, just so that I could kind of show people what I was trying to do, what my style is, what I cared about. And then it's all a big blur now. Yeah, and then I just started writing the script, and I found 2 producers locally who neither one of whom had made one feature before, but the other whom had not. And we just started raising money, and we, you know, we did a crowdfunding campaign and everything. And I guess, so given everything I'm saying, my advice would be, you know, work with what you've got to the extent that you can. You know, I think there's so many stories. There's so many stories that can be told with not very much. And you know, if you can rally what's around you in the early days where, you know, you don't have resources, and see what you can get out of that, it's really good exercise, and you might make something amazing.
And when you know, you're speaking to the challenges of getting it financed and that element, what were some of the bigger challenges that you had when you got to set or in pre-production that you faced?
I would say I, you know, have never been stretched that thin ever in life, and to have so much responsibility on, you know, in the hands of so few people with who haven't really, you know, had that much responsibility before. It was a lot. It's a lot. But you know, I was surrounded by people I really, really could trust, and people who I knew had my back and who, were going to help me if we were, if we really, if things weren't going well. But luckily, I mean, we were really lucky. Nothing went wrong, but it was very scrappy, grassroots stuff. But it was kind of beautiful. And I think having a small crew of folks who have not, made a ton of movies before, it really helps that everyone is invested and everyone's kind of on your side and wants to do well and is happy to be there and is excited about the film and the story that you're telling and passionate about what they're bringing to it. And yeah, that was kind of, I always want to make movies this way, it just was so nice to have a family making the film.
That is kind of the ideal scenario. I'm also just kind of curious because I mean you're in so many different places throughout the south of France in the film. I'm personally curious, how long did you have to shoot? How many days were you shooting?
13. Yeah, it was crazy.
Oh my gosh. Does that mean you were shooting like really long days?
Well, okay, so it was 13 actual shooting days, but we were all there for about 3 to 4 weeks. They were regular day on a movie set days. I mean, I think another key, I guess this turns into advice too, is that to pull off, being an editor really helped me, because I knew exactly what my cuts were going to be. I knew exactly where I wanted to, cover each part of the scene from, and so I spent a lot of time with my cinematographer getting on the same page about that before we shot. So we saved so much time, and yeah, we also didn't, and when I talk about, looking at what's around you, what's manageable, like we didn't travel much. It was really mostly in that house, in the house next door, in the streets literally around the house. It looks like we went all over the south of France, but I tell you, we did not. We were in like a 5-mile radius the entire time. I think, knowing the place really well, I could strategically find the spots that would look great that were not far. I mean, that's also the benefit of shooting somewhere that is that you can really like get the juice out of what's there because you know what's there.
You certainly squeezed the juice.
Thank you.
It's
squeeze the wine from the grapes, if you will.
Exactly. Well, unless we have another question that pops up as we're wrapping up here, Marion, I want to offer up any last words that you would like to share before we close out. So I give the floor to you.
Thanks. Yeah, well, thank you. This has been fun. What do I want to share? I guess, well, I've been thinking a lot about self-love recently and just and a fun thing about filmmaking is that when you step away from your project and then you go back and watch it later, like, or when I watch my short that I made when I was a senior in college, I see things that I was subconsciously thinking that I didn't even know I was putting out there. But in this case, I've been just thinking about self-love a lot and how important that is to being able to love someone else. And I think that's really speaks to Birdie and Lane, and even Fred. Fred so clearly loves himself, which is why he's so unfazed by what's going on. And I think Birdie is very much protecting her own self-love, and Lane is really lacking in self-love in that particular moment in life. And yeah, just, you know, as we move out of COVID, just remember to love yourself, because shit's gonna get weird. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
I do have one final question here from William, who says he thought your movie was sensual, thoughtful, and interesting. What would be a preferred way to follow you? It would be nice to know how best to support your work.
Thanks, William. Glad you thought so. You can follow me on Instagram. Should I put it in the...
You can put it in the chat if you want.
Look at that. I'll put it in the chat. Yeah, that really is the best way, to be honest with you. Oh, you should also follow the My Belle, My Beauty
on Instagram handle.
Yeah.
And we also have a comment from Lauren, who would just like to say that she loves you. Not a question, just a fact.
Thanks, Lauren. I love you too. Thank you.
And with that, I want to thank you again so much for calling in. I love that this year means that we get to have so many more filmmakers here with us virtually. Wish we could have you in Seattle, but come on through anytime. We'd love to have you.
Thanks. I cannot wait. Please send me an invite as soon as you can.
Absolutely. And thank you.
By that I mean plane ticket.
Right, yeah. I'll get the charge card. Yeah, I want to thank everybody in the audience for participating and joining tonight's Q&A. Please stick around and check out some more through the 18th.